to the budget debate, we look at the big picture that Finance Minister Arun Jaitley will be looking at, the vision program that he will like to lay out for Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and the vision that Prime Minister Narendra Modi himself will have about the work that this government has to perform over the next 4.5 years. Will this budget look at that long-term vision that this government needs to be working towards, or will they be still stuck in their own short-term goals as is the recently lost elections of Delhi and the upcoming elections of Bihar? That's what we're going to focus on in this debate, where we look at the big picture. Let's look at what the economy is really looking at. Let me introduce my guests in this budget debate. I'm joined by Dr. Rajiv Kumar from the Center for Policy Research, a man who's been advising the government on some of the things they should be doing in this budget. Dr. Rajiv Kumar, a lot of inputs going from you to the Finance Minister and the Prime Minister?
Some, and we were invited, some of us, to give those inputs, but I hope that some of them are taken on board.
Okay. Lord Meghnad Desai, the man who we call the wise man of the budget and the man who's actually going to dumb down the budget for all our viewers, but also tell us the road that the government really needs to look at. Also joining us is Omkar Goswami, heading various boards of various companies, and of course has an eye on what corporate India is really looking for. But apart from that, as an economist, what the government really should be doing in looking at the fine print of this particular budget. Let's look at the big picture of this particular budget, the backdrop in which this budget will come up. We have what is called on India's right side, we have the current account deficit that's really dipping in the recent times. We are looking at Forex, which is at an all-time high. The financial institutions have been pumping in money, taking the stock exchange to new highs virtually every other day. We have inflation rate, which is in control, which is even forced and even actually made, the RBI governor cut the repo rate in January itself. And are we looking at a second round of cuts is something that everybody is talking about. And of course, a prediction that the economy is likely to go at 7.4%. So given that big picture, clearly it seems to be that everything is working for Prime Minister Narendra Modi as well as for Finance Minister Arun Jaitley, notwithstanding the dip in the oil prices globally that we've seen. But still there are worrying signs in the economy which will be playing on the Finance Minister's mind. And let me list out some of those. The boom in tax collections is still missing, because we are looking at a growth which is much below the 19% growth that the Finance Minister had said last time. The excise growth is still an area of concern. Bank credit growth is still sluggish, and therefore giving us a sense that, the offtake of credit from banks and therefore the investments not as robust as both Prime Minister and Finance Minister would want them to be. And corporate balance sheet, Omkar, you'll bear me out, not still looking that strong. So clearly a lot of worrying factors still on the mind. So what do you think the big picture is going to be? Omkar, let's start with you.
Well, the way I would, if I were the Finance Minister, I would say the big picture is India is now more poised for growth than ever before. Number one is external. Oil prices are down to historical lows in recent times. Commodity prices are down. Naphtha prices are down. So we are in a benign international environment. People are still looking at India exactly as you said. Monies are coming in. And there has been a change from the Raj of the last era, where nothing was happening and everything stopped, to a point where it's gone a little bit beyond green shoots, that people are now waiting to make their investments. And therefore, my big picture as a finance minister is to accelerate the process and to ensure that people have a much greater animal spirits going forward and put everything around it so that it does happen. And a finance minister who does it, and I think Mr. Arun Jaitley will, and a prime minister that emphasizes it, which I think Mr. Narendra Modi will create animal spirits that will make investments happen. And the budget is not the only one, but a very important decider in that change.
Dr. Rajiv Kumar, the fact is that all these big announcements, the euphoria around it, have been there now for the last 6-7 months. But we still haven't seen that rejuvenation on the ground as we would want to see it. So where is the gap really coming from?
I mean, just as you said, you see, there has been a lot of talk, there's been a huge amount of rhetoric, but conditions on the ground haven't changed. And please do not mistake this announcement of 7.04% of growth by the revised GDP estimates to indicate at all that things have improved on the ground. The credit offtake, as you mentioned, is very poor. But so let me not go into, let me just say one sentence in that, which is that ground realities have not changed. Investors are still very
So you belong to the Deepak Parekh school of thought.
Yes.
He's just made a statement that
Absolutely.
ease of doing business in India.
Absolutely.
So are we saying all of us belong to the Deepak Parekh, or are some of us going to look at things in a more positive manner?
In large measure,
the facts
Deepak is
speak
right.
for themselves. The credit deposit ratio has been declining. The non-agricultural credit offtake is very low. The investors are very skeptical, both domestic and foreign. So this is the background, but at the same time, to this background, we must add what Omkar has said, which is that a very benign external environment. So it is for us to now lose the growth momentum that we can achieve. That's the message. Everything is there ready. People's expectations are there for you to push growth, and the circumstances are there for you to push growth. In this condition, what you must do in this budget is to take all the steps necessary to reignite investment. And private investment will take time to get going, because it takes time, it acts as a lag. Therefore, what you must do is to take the steps to get public investment out there and increase that as much as possible, because public investment is known to have a crowding in effect in India for private investment. So my message is, if you like, to the Modi Jaitley team would be to not become dogmatic about fiscal deficit. Attain your 4.1 target if you can in an honest manner, but then give yourself much more fiscal space going forward for this year, financial year 15-16 and 16-17, so that you make sure that investment is on the rise and growth is spurred and growth momentum is achieved.
Lord Meghna Desai, you say you belong to the Deepak Parekh school of thought. You also agreed with Omkar Goswami when he said that India is the hot destination and monies are coming in. Aren't these two contradictory terms?
Well, I think the Sensex is the only place which is happy. But I think it's happy is basically waiting on the future, it's riding on future expectations. It is not, there are no achievements on the ground scene, which is what Deepak Parekh was saying. Okay, as the Americans say, there's a lot of sizzle, but where is the steak? And this is the thing.
And
what
Arun Jaitley, just to clarify what you're saying, there's a huge difference between equity inflows and inflows of foreign direct investment, which create capacity, improve productivity and generate jobs. The latter is not happening.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that you hear what Deepak Parekh is saying, and then Arun Jaitley has to say, given the background that Omkar talked about, I'm now going to lay out for you the plan in which growth will be genuinely 7.5, not according to the new base that CSO is done, but in terms of the old-fashioned numbers, 7.5 to 8% is achievable. We are going to achieve it. We are going to achieve it in this parliament, because that was a promise on which Narendra Modi was elected. Jobs have to be created. Income has to be created.
But how do you see all of that happening? Government expenditures down. So fiscal deficit is one number they're looking at. But that also means that from 20-25%, you're down to about 7 to 8%, which means public investments are not really happening the way they should. So where is the indicator really going out to the economy that even the government is coming out with expenditure? Are we looking at a scheme like the golden quadrilateral in the good old Vajpayee days, which revved up investments in the public sector?
There are a number of things. As Rajiv was saying, whether you achieve 4.1% or not doesn't matter so much. I hope they don't achieve it by fudging the numbers. But lay it down. So listen, what the big story is a growth story and not the deficit story. There are a lot of resources sitting with the PSUs, idle. The government can harness them. I'm sure the railway budget that Suresh Prabhu is going to have good stuff in it. And so you dovetail these infrastructure. There should be a big infrastructure story, a really big infrastructure story. And that will point to the fact that government is serious about manufacturing growth. And I think if they can do that...
You have to. At the end of the day, Navika, does Mr. Jaitley want to be seen, and I don't think he will, want to be seen as a finance minister which come hail or high water got my 4.1 and come hail or high water will get my 3.8, but hell with growth?
Yeah, exactly.
He doesn't want to be seen as that.
Of course not.
I mean, it'd be stupid because he can't get that, you know, if he doesn't get growth. So the point that Deepak Parekh has said is a very good warning bell that you have had 9 months, you've made a lot of slogans, things yet haven't happened on the ground, and it's time for you to ring your own alarm bell.
But his own managing director of the bank, HDFC, Aditya Puri, contradicts him. So which
Aditya,
side to believe?
I'll go with
the
Deepak.
older man.
I'll go with Deepak.
Believe the older man.
And what he's saying is, please ring the alarm bell and get your backside moving.
Exactly. Absolutely.
And if you can't get your backside moving now, you will have kissed everything goodbye. And this budget is a time to show that yes, we have got our backside moving. And then after that, 3 months later or 4 months later, you can turn around to Deepak Parekh and say, we heard you, are you happy now?
Navika, can I just come in here? Investment has declined from about 38% to now 31%. 31%. Yeah. Huge drop as a percentage of GDP, right? Your credit offtake is not growing at more than 10%. Banks are sitting flush with money which they can't lend at this point of time. The smaller of the enterprises, the MSMEs, are in dire trouble at this point of time. So what do? So at this point of time, you've got to get that investment up there. And for that, there are two essential things that you want to do. One, forget the fiscal dogma. Focus on getting revenue deficit down to zero, but then get your public investment up there. And two, make life easy for the MSME sector.
Just think of the power sector.
Get the inspectors off the back and get them moving. And this is one of the points. You see, Prime Minister Modi has already announced his targets about getting housing for all, getting electricity in every house by 2019, and getting the railways going, etc. Just follow those leads. So, for example, you can announce a golden quadrilateral in the railways with high-speed trains, which will take a huge amount of money, right? You can announce various irrigation schemes in the eastern part of the country. So there are large scope for public investment to be made. You should do that. But more importantly, I think at this point of time, you have to create that trust with the smaller entrepreneur, that you're not a government which is only listening to, with due respect to them, the Deepak Parekhs and the Aditya Puris of the world, but you got an ear to the ground for the difficulties that these guys have. If you do that,
just giving you one example, and it's very important.
So public investment, we are all in agreement that public investment is the way to go.
No, absolutely. And I'll just give you a small one. Also cleaning up backlogs. Very simple. A small entrepreneur cannot have a captive power plant. He needs electricity, right? She or he needs electricity. In most states, for 7, 8, 9 hours a day, you won't get electricity. Why not? The reason is that the supply of electricity is not available to him. Why not? Why are so many power projects being held up? Why are so many electricity distribution companies bankrupt and not being able to give power? If you are not going to be able to solve that in your period, then you cannot meet the electricity for all. So there's no rocket science anymore. Everything in India is understood by anybody who has a small 3-digit IQ, okay? Everything is understood. He just has to execute.
Well, the point is taken that public investment is the way to go forward unless the government really pushes up the public investment and not gets bogged down by the fiscal numbers. That's something that can actually rev up the economy as far as the investment is concerned. Credit offtake, an eye on the credit offtake is something that the governments will need to do. But we'll also have to discuss then what happens to the health of the banking sector itself with NPAs reaching certain alarming proportions is also something that the government will need to keep an eye on. We'll discuss on the other side of this very short break what the government will do in the social sector versus the corporate sector. Which side is the emphasis going to be on? We'll be back after a very short break.